Well, welcome. We're back with Conversations with the Vice Provost. My name is Michael Dennin. I'm the Vice Provost for Teaching and Learning and Dean of the Division of Undergraduate Education here at UC Irvine. It's my pleasure to be here with our new Dean of the School of Education, Richard Arum. He's with me for a kind of an extended conversation on some key issues around education, teaching and learning, and what's happening at UCI. So thank you for joining us.
It's great to be here, and this is a moment in history where our work is never more important
Exactly.
than now.
So let's follow up on that and go into a little detail. It's obviously been an interesting last year or so in the United States around the political cycle. And people might think, oh, you've got a Dean of Education, a Vice Provost of Teaching and Learning, why are we talking politics?
Yeah.
So I think you have some great intros into that and why we might connect to that. So maybe I'll let you lead off and we'll see what.
Yeah, so for me, you look at the current state of American politics, and you come to the conclusion that things that we accept as important in the academy and try to develop in our students, that is critical thinking, complex reasoning skills, understanding arguments and evidence. There was so little evidence of that over the past electoral cycle, right, where our rhetoric at an emotional level was used to appeal to voters, and with little regard for facts, evidence, argumentation.
Right.
And so that's the piece I worry about with the past electoral cycle. We obviously have there are political differences in this country that should be celebrated and embraced. And so the fact that students and citizens choose different candidates is not a particular concern of mine, but it's the character of the race, the quality of the democratic process that was eroded in the past 12 months. That's of deep concern to me, and I think it's related to education.
Yeah, I think it is. And something you said in our sort of a little initial teaser, which I think is worth repeating, is obviously one of our first concerns in many of these situations is our students, right, their safety and their well-being. But I think there's also perhaps maybe a role of education to help them with that as well. When I look at it, one of our purposes perhaps in education, when you look at critical thinking skills, when you look at the ability to analyze, is perhaps to provide also help with and a little bit of a buffer to deal with difficult situations. I mean, that may be overselling what education can do. Obviously, there's a lot of other factors around supporting our students that are more important or as important. But do you see a little bit of that?
Yeah, no, I think absolutely. I mean, for me, as an educator and someone who still has tremendous faith in the power of education and the future of our country, I believe in the power of rational discourse, that it will win the day at the end. But again, I fear that we've, as educators, we've let our school education system drift too far from that core purpose. And education, remember, Michael, as you know, education was set up in our country. We were the first to have mass schooling at the elementary level, right, to promote literacy, to help people be democratic citizens, not to get jobs as clerks,
right,
but to help them to be democratic citizens. And so education in the U.S. has always been about promoting democratic citizenship, and by citizenship, I don't mean a narrow definition of a citizen status.
Right.
The idea in the U.S. was always you would prepare everyone to act in these roles because they're fundamental to a democratic society.
Well, and I think that is often referred to, I think, back often to the idea of Jeffersonian democracy, and even from the beginning, this idea that you had to be educated to engage fully in the process of decision making around what was going on.
And that education wasn't filling in the bubble in a multiple choice test. It was about being able to to think critically about the information put in front of you, and think about, complex reasoning. Think about, we are facing as a country extraordinarily complex political, environmental, social, economic problems.
Right.
And so developing the ability in individuals to sort through that complexity and make reasoned judgments is really an essential task for us.
So I'm going to sort of raise a challenge for our colleagues. At the risk of insulting our peers, which I try not to do in these interviews, I feel one thing at the university, and this is going to lead into this idea of assessment, one thing at the university that we're very good at is, I think, selecting and finding the people who are naturally good at critical thinking, naturally good at the complex problem solving. We know what that looks like as a skill. I would challenge us that maybe we're not as good at teaching and developing it. And I think it's, and this gives us the idea of assessment and what we want to do. So many aspects of assessment we can discuss, but I think one is a check for ourselves. Are our students achieving what we really claim they're achieving? Right? And as we move into the 21st century and we're solidly in it, I think we keep trying to celebrate critical thinking, complex problem solving, working in teams and communication. But I haven't really seen the faculty as a whole move towards, teaching that intentionally and assessing it intentionally. And I think your school provides that research basis for it, and our office is supposed to provide that support and the tools so they can do it rationally. And that's where a lot of the partnership comes. How do you see that evolving? Do you see that starting?
Yeah, so I think that's absolutely right. And faculty have always been great at the task of selecting and sorting, and that is a function of schooling also. And they're also great at assessing performance in a classroom setting.
Right.
But what we're talking about here is not just about a classroom level mastery, but a level up.
Right.
What happens at the end of a program? What happens at the end of 4 years of education? Have we developed the type of competencies for students to be successful in the 21st century, both in terms of the labor market, but also as democratic citizens? I'm going to say that. We've got to say that again and again for the next 4 years. And there I say we haven't done a good job of coming together as colleagues and taking on that work of defining what those learning outcomes need to be for the 21st century, and then assessing it so that we're sure the students got there, but also that we can help improve our practice. We can't improve our practice until we have some measures of what's working and what's not working.
And I think a piece of that, when I meet with my counterparts and we have discussions, one of the things we're looking at, people always go to, for faculty, if you change the reward structure, that'll help change behavior. But then, of course, you have to assess faculty and what they're doing. And we realized, you said something very interesting. I think the model up to now at the university has been teaching as an individual endeavor, which is certainly a key part of it. But we haven't maybe addressed the collective piece as well. And I know you've done some work in that. Can you maybe just comment a little bit on maybe some of the challenges, but some of the places we've had successes, so faculty can be excited about what's achievable when we work together as a collective?
Right. So you're absolutely right. Faculty have not been incentivized, encouraged to have those conversations and define learning outcomes and develop assessments, meaningful assessments at a program or university level. And when those kind of conversations have happened at all, it's often around kind of an accreditation system that's imposed from the outside, and faculty comply with the demands, but it doesn't, let's say their hearts aren't in it.
Right.
And so when you think about assessment, for me, it brings us back to what are the purposes of it. And if the purposes are to think about how do we better ensure student success, how do we see what's working and what's not working so that we can improve our instructional practice and delivery, that's something I think you can get faculty around the table on.
Yeah.
And so as you mentioned, Michael, I had worked with faculty in 6 fields of study
Right.
to have these conversations. And some of them started out, these were faculty experts in teaching, learning, and assessment in 6 fields, business, biology, economics, sociology, communications, and history, serving 40% of undergrads. You start out initially, faculty is like, oh, hey, what's this about?
Right.
What's going on here? But very quickly, we found that they came to embrace the work and have discussions building on past work in their own fields to define 21st century learning outcomes, and also to articulate what meaningful assessment would look like that wasn't multiple choice.
Right. Now, did they also just, this is always, now that I'm an administrator, I realize money matters. Do they get into it all, some of the challenges? I mean, we're at a research university, and I think one of the things that happens, and a conversation that happens at UCI and other big research universities, is how do you scale some of these things, right? Because we know we can scale grading to multiple choice, right? Sometimes I hear from faculty, but how am I really going to I end up with 100, 200, 400 students in my class. How am I really going to get at some of these other issues? I know one of the things we are using a lot is kind of that informal assessment, maybe the more sort of formative assessment that happens with learning assistants and TAs as you go around and interact and watch your students. You can learn a lot from them indirectly. But are there other ways? Were there things people talk about?
Well, so the resources are a challenge. They're a typical 4-year student in most programs that aren't associated with licensing and credentialing will go through without any formal assessment at all, other than at the classroom level. And there's the institution and the students neither have any expectation to spend resources to remedy that, and so resources very much are a challenge in this area. But also that speaks to kind of the importance of faculty working together and working together across campuses to develop some of these tools that can be adopted in. Because right now, with the accreditation process, that works. Every department in the country, in the US, and 5,000 different institutions tell us how you're assessing learning outcomes. And everyone comes up with a symbolic compliance, we're assessing learning outcomes this way. But basically, think of the logic of that. You're asking 5,000 colleges and universities times 100 departments in each one to develop their own assessment strategy and tools.
Instead of having a collective one.
It's a collective ones that we share together, that the disciplinary associations have participated in and bought in, that aren't about teaching narrow standardization of curriculum, but really these larger 21st century competencies and concepts.
And one thing I've noticed a little bit, and in my work in this area and what I've seen, faculty have the sort of built-in habit that when they do assessments for a grade, they need to be completely new and reinvented each time, because otherwise they'll be out there and students will cheat, right? What I've sort of noticed when you're looking at these higher skills like critical thinking, complex problem solving, a lot of times there's no real ability to cheat by the nature of what you're assessing. You're not just looking for facts or this or that. And so a sort of common shared assessment is a little more achievable.
Right. I mean, the thing about the cheating, but also the problem of teaching to the test.
Right, yeah.
So ideally, you want to develop assessments that are broad and deep enough that if people are going to orient their instruction in that direction, it's a good thing.
It's a good thing, right, exactly.
So you give students performance tasks to do, where they have to think through evidence in different forms, documents, reports around data from lab experiments and so on. They have to think through the validity of it, the reliability, make inferences. You give them a task that if people want to teach to that,
you're very happy.
Let them do it.
And that kind of blends into maybe the last part of our conversation, collaborations at universities like ours between schools of education doing research in this. And at UCI, we're even broader because we have the advantage of having the assumed named professors of teaching who do discipline-based research and scholarship, and then we have an office of teaching and learning to help faculty implement these things. And you build this ecosystem all at one university. You want to maybe comment a little bit, since you were drawn here by that. I'll take credit for you coming here.
We're ideally positioned at UC Irvine to do this work. We have a diverse student body, which is a resource we can draw on. We have the institutions that you've articulated set up. We have a 21st century education school that all the faculty have been hired and are doing cutting edge research in this area around technology, around making use of data, assessments, educational science. So we have this resource that I believe can move the education school from the periphery and margins of the university to the center of a modern university. And it's at the center of a modern university because all of a sudden the students are at the center and their learning is at the center. So the more we attend to students and their learning and elevate that, the more that an education school that does educational science and can speak to faculty across disciplinary boundaries about issues that are important to them around reliability, validity, the possibilities to be a model for a 21st century university. I think it's real here at UCI.
So if you don't mind, and we can edit this out if it doesn't work, can I put you on the spot a little bit, maybe highlight 2 or 3 things from your school that you would say are maybe top research interests, and then I can comment on where we see our ability to help implement them from our office. Let's try that.
Yes, and this is a conversation in real time.
Right. We did not plan this.
No, well, and the work is organically developing, and of course, when I say it's organically developing, it has to be faculty driven.
Right.
And so, as much as I am a faculty member, I'm teaching in the next quarter, and I'm a lifelong educator. It still has to come from my faculty where they see the collaboration. But we have, for example, Mark Warschauer. Mm-hmm. He's already organically making these connections between our units. He's at the forefront of doing work on digital learning.
Right.
And then
we brought him. He's our faculty director for our new Teaching and Learning Research Center, which really is a nice thing to have. I mean, as much as a lot of the research is centered in the School of Education, and a lot of the faculty will come from there for this research center, one of the things I think people who are on the inside understand, but maybe on the outside don't, is the role of research centers at universities like ours to bring faculty from across different schools, different disciplines. And this will be a place where the discipline-based researchers who are sitting out in the schools can interact with the faculty with the real expertise in education research and really design some interesting collaborative projects. And I think the work on technology is a good example that you mentioned that Mark's doing, because it's bringing people from all around campus into asking the very hard question, where do technologies benefit our students, as opposed to just, can we save money by putting everything online?
Yeah, and as educators, how can we not be interested in embracing these new technologies and seeing how they serve students? Technology is not going to be, a panacea for the challenges facing education in this country. But again, how could you not use the tools that are available?
Yeah, I once heard someone say the analogy is sort of like, imagine when the printing press came out, if educators and universities rejected books. Said, no, that's too fluffy, and it's not going to do anything. But at the same time, books didn't clearly make education. It made it way more broadly available, but you still needed universities, you still needed human interaction.
Yes, and the same is true for technology, for sure. And so we also have faculty already organically working with some of the STEM faculty here on assessments of innovative practices. An area I think we need to grow is that there's a growing awareness in educational research about the importance of student advisement and support systems in helping students have structured pathways.
And would you say that's kind of faculty advisors, the professional advisors, both working together?
I think the whole system, and we were just talking about technology, let's start about making use of the new technology out there to better understand what students are doing and their pathways through. So We had an informal conversation yesterday about this new resource coming online that takes seriously. You can look for evidence in students' course pathways and identify where the bottlenecks are and address them.
Yeah, no, that's an exciting idea and project, and we have a project on campus that we're calling COMPASS for now. It's Comprehensive Analytics for Student Success, and it comes out of, the background a little bit was, for a while people, and they still are, got excited about predictive analytics. Maybe I can predict if a student's likely to be successful or not. And one of the dangers with that, of course, is it has some value and it works, but at the individual student level, it can miss things. You're always basing models on past students, and our student demographics are changing. So if you're going to use that, you have to use it very carefully. But one thing that's come out of this that's very clear is data can be very powerful in analyzing the sort of situations you just mentioned. What's the course structure and pathways for students? So as an institution, we can make improvements. And also for getting in advisors' hands rapidly the data they need. One that we like to point out, often people are worried about students and their challenges in not getting through the system, but we also have the other side. We have very, very talented students who don't come with the cultural background of a university. We're over 60% first generation. They're not necessarily as aware of the support systems to know to study abroad and what that means. That it's not just vacation in Europe, it's actually a valid...
It can be more than that.
It can be more than that, exactly. Undergraduate research, participating in Europe and doing that. Or simply applying for scholarships that are available, or thinking graduate school might actually be an option, and you can actually get paid to go to graduate school. And so identifying these students in the sea of data and getting them in front of faculty and professional advisors so they can be informed of the opportunities to them is a huge win for our students, for our advising system, and for the whole system. So these are some of the things that data can really, I think, do for our students.
How do we deploy the technology? But these are also human systems, right? Exactly. You're going to have the connections between faculty advisors and students, professional advisors and students, and so on. The word I like in this space is intentionality.
Right.
So we have to be much more intentional about how we're serving the needs of students. And in the past, the idea was you bring the kids to campus, let them run wild. The curriculum was loosely structured. Faculty weren't coordinating well about what these pathways were. And guess what? Magic will happen.
Right, yeah.
And it did happen.
Yeah.
Higher education, the power of education is so great that even with that kind of very loose, unintentional design, great things happened in American universities. But we don't have that, as the past election cycle shows us, we don't have that luxury anymore. We're going to have to be intentional about what the learning outcomes are and how are we going to prepare students to be successful as adults in the labor market, but also as democratic citizens.
Well, Richard, I don't think that could be said any better. I think we should end there. That's a great summary. Thank you for your time. Hope you enjoyed watching this second of Conversations with the Vice Provost, and we'll see you at our next one. Thank you. Thanks for watching. This is the time where you get to be part of the conversation. Comment below. You know the drill. You know how to do that. Subscribe, follow us, look for us on all our social media, and stay part of the conversations. Thank you.